Welcome to
Hello.
our BBC discussion on Google Hangouts.
And I'm Sarah Wong from BBC Chinese Service.
Now, this is a collaboration between the Africa, the East Asia, and the South Asia hubs of the BBC. Now, in just 3 days' time, the United Kingdom could very well fall apart. Scotland will be putting a stark question to its people, whether or not it should be an independent country.
Now, by the look of the recent poll results and the efforts, the campaigning efforts that are still going on, it's going to be a very tight contest and a very close call. Now, I saw some gorgeous-looking fashion models have those pings, yes pings on the fashion show. But Scotland is a very diverse place. People living there comprise of many different cultures.
Indeed, and so what will those many different cultures decide? What will Scotland's international citizens decide to do in 3 days' time, and why? How do they feel about voting for Scotland's future, and how the Scottish issues compare to other events and other situations in the past and the present and the future, particularly from the countries from which they come? We value your input, so if you want to interrupt, listen to our participants. If you want to say something, just raise your hand and we'll try and come to you.
Now, we do have some very good speakers today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and tell us whether it's a yes or no vote, or don't know, haven't decided, whether they can or cannot vote. If not, and which camp they support. So could we start with Mr. Yap?
Hello. Yes, I'm a no voter, and I am able to vote. Definite no.
And where are you from originally? Perhaps
I'm originally from Malaysia, but I went to Scotland to study medicine and just stayed on. And I'm now a UK citizen.
Thanks very much. Who have you got next?
That would be Leela.
Hi, I'm Leela Soma. I'm a definite yes. I came originally from India 45 years ago. I'm retired now, and I'm a very passionate yes voter.
Okay, so no dispute about that then. Let's move on to Ndidi.
Ndidi.
Hello, my name is Ndidi Aporame. I'm originally from Nigeria. I came here to study, and I met my husband here, and I've been here ever since. So I'll be voting yes, because I'm just passionate about Scotland, and I have history here.
And our next guest would be Sarah Towers.
Hi, I'm Sarah Towers. I'm from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and I've been in Scotland for 2 years now studying, and I'm voting no.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And then finally, we've got Mr. Xu.
Hi everyone, I'm Xu from Taiwan, China, and I'm a foreign student based in Edinburgh. Because I'm just staying in Edinburgh for 1 year, so I'm disenfranchised, but I'm still open my mind to both camps. I would like to hear the voice from both of you. Yeah.
Okay, so you're part of that critical mass of undecided voters, because of course, as we were saying earlier, this vote is so close, it could really come down to, well, in fact, it probably definitely will come down to those people who haven't decided yes or no just yet. But let's look at a couple of your responses there in more detail. Ndidi from Nigeria, you say that you're definitely going to vote yes. Can you just tell us a bit more about why that is?
Well, I just believe every state, as it is, should be able to govern their own affairs and not let it be decided by people who are not based in the area. So it would be good if they could vote and get independent or be independent and govern their own affairs, basically.
Is this? I mean, you are a Nigerian. Nigeria has, in the last 50 years, had a history of secessionist movements. I'm thinking of the Biafran movement, of course. What's currently going on in Nigeria at the moment has led some to say that, you know, the North should just separate from the South. That may be a viable alternative, perhaps not. I mean, you being a Nigerian, has that had an impact at all on your decision to vote yes?
I won't really say so, no. I just think it will be fair for the state to govern its own affairs and not, not having their decisions being taken from somewhere else, basically. I think it's more of that.
Thank you very much. And then I noticed that Dr. Yep has been a very passionate no voter. Could you tell us more about your view?
Yes, I'm actually a pensioner. I'm retired, and most of my concerns are economic. I think the cost of separation would be very, very high, and the problem would be that separation would not necessarily lead to independence because there will need to be a lot of money being borrowed. The belief by the yes camp is that there's lots of money in North Sea oil and various industries, but in fact, North Sea oil is depleting very fast and will be gone in about 10 years. There's a belief that Scottish industry can take over, but in fact, most of Scottish industry is actually foreign-owned, including the whisky and the salmon farming industries. And there's a belief that we can continue our having progressive policies, but if you're not prosperous, you can't pay for progressive policies. So I believe that independence, of course, is possible, but it would be it would lead to a decrease in the living standard of the Scottish citizens.
And it would be you say it would be at quite a cost. Leela Soma, you are originally from India. You are very clear that you would vote yes. Tell us a bit about what has informed that decision. We seem to have lost.
So
let's move on to Sarah. Now, Sarah from Quebec. Now, Quebec is often cited as an example of the country which has gone through the closest mirroring of what Scotland is facing in the coming days. You'll remember that in 1995, I think it was, Sarah, they had a very close referendum. The no camp eventually won that referendum. Is that informing why you've decided to say no, Sarah?
A little bit yes and no. I think the situation between Scotland and the rest of the UK is very different to the situation with Quebec and the rest of Canada. Some of what's happened in Quebec in recent years since the referendum in '95 has kind of fueled my views.
I see Leela's back, and we seem to have lost Sarah. So why don't we ask Leela that question again? Leela, what is it that is making...
Sarah's back.
From India, what is it that is making you so definitive in your answer that you're going to be giving on Thursday?
First of all, I'm sorry I got cut off a little bit, but I consider Scotland also as my second home. I've been here longer than I lived in India. But I feel very strongly I have to refute quite a few that both Dr. Yak said about worries about pensions and economic reasons. The cost of separation will be for a very short time. And more important is that thing about North Sea oil for 10 years being depleted is ridiculous. And I think there's been a lot of scaremongering from the no section of the campaign. They waited till 8 days before.
So Peng Lee Yap is scaremongering, you're saying?
Well, the basic thing is there's an oil field in 1981 that was found in the west coast of Scotland, and basically what they've done is because of Trident, the British government would not allow that to be exploited. That is on fact. If all of you want to go and see oilandgas.com, you'll actually find these facts in there.
Okay, so I mean those are specific. So you're basically saying that an independent Scotland would be very much financially viable.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got Norway, and to take example of Norway, they had an oil fund immediately as soon as they found the oil. Now, if England or UK government was so wonderful, they didn't even do that. You know, they didn't set up an oil fund. They squandered the money, and in fact, the constant riposte from UK government is that Scotland takes too much money because of the Barnett formula, that we actually get £1,200 more from the taxpayers of England. Well, if that's the case, why do you want to hold on to us? Why do you want to bring the Queen, David Beckham, everyone in to say, please stay with us?
Let's bring Sarah back.
It's quite simply, Scotland needs to have its own freedom. It's as simple as that.
Now we have Sarah back online, and before we go to you, Sarah, Leela, could you please move a bit to your left side because you're sitting to right, and sit a bit higher.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, why don't we just remind everybody this is a BBC Google Hangout discussion on Scottish independence here on the BBC.
And you can watch it on YouTube, BBC News Channel, or Google+. Sarah, can we go back to you? Sorry, we lost you.
That's okay.
So you were telling us about Quebec, and you think Quebec isn't necessarily a good example to compare to Scotland.
I think there are similarities with, you know, the identity and the history of wanting independence, but I think the situations are quite different. I don't really want to compare the two, even though they are quite similar. I think it's more important to focus on, you know, Scotland's situation right now. And for me, the reason why I'm so uncertain, it's not that I'm necessarily against independence. It's more there's just too much uncertainty, and I think the Yes campaign is playing too much with the risk of uncertainty. I feel like there's not as much definitive planning, any kind of structure, or it's too hypothetical for me to...
Is that uncertainty about financial matters, or is it security, or what is it specifically? Just briefly.
I think they all intertwine together. I guess what it comes down to is ultimately the finance. I feel there isn't as much of a sustainable and promising financial plan. At least that's the impression I get, and I'm more concerned that it's going to be the healthcare and the education system which are the first that are going to be hit should there be some sort of financial crisis, because we're not even sure what currency Scotland is going to use.
Indeed, I'm sure Leela would disagree with you, but let's move on.
Yes, you were talking about similarities. Now, Mr. Xu, you've
Yes?
been you've been very interested in the whole debate and everything, and you said you're an observer. Now, is it because you see some similarities?
Mm-hmm. You mean the similarity from the Taiwan issue or the Scotland issue?
Why you can tell us why you're so interested?
Oh yes, of course. I'm personally from Taiwan. Maybe everybody knows that it's another place confused by the separatism or the unionist issue in the world. But I do really admire that the UK, the people in the UK, no matter the Westminster government or the Holyrood government, can make such an agreement to let the referendum happen. I think the referendum itself is a triumph of the democracy. But some will thought, oh, okay, now the UK was threatened by the nationalism or nationalist emotion. But as far as I've seen here for the 1 year, I think in addition to the identity issue, emotional issue, or the historical tangles between England and Scotland, there are still lots of other issues to be discussed and debated quite reasonably in the whole process. That's why I really admire the way you have gone. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you say you've admired the example. You've admired the way that the whole process is carried out, and I guess that leads us to another question, which I'll put to all of you. Is this really, do you think, whichever side of the fence you're coming down on, is this the best way of sorting out differences? Say, for example, in a marriage, if there's difficulties or differences in a marriage, doesn't automatically lead to divorce. It's it strengthens a marriage when the two partners work out those differences and move forward. Isn't that what should be happening here, rather than going for complete divorce or schism?
I think for UK's case, maybe it will be a appropriate way to sort out, because if we trace back to the historical origin of the United Kingdom, there was a union act between the two sides. Now, if the people from one side decided to make more devolution or even to leave away, maybe it will be an appropriate way for the case of UK to deal these kind of seats in such a way.
Let's ask Ndidi then. What do you think? Do you think that you said you were going to vote yes, that independence is the way to go, but shouldn't this bickering couple work out a different way of resolving their differences rather than going separate ways?
I want to believe they've tried, and possibly this might be the best route to take in a way. Like I said before, about handling your own affairs and your policies, your taxes, your immigration, and things like that. So probably this might be a good route to go, in my opinion. Yes, I know you might want to resolve your issues, but I feel this is a good way to go for Scotland to be independent. It's just something about having your own house, having your own car and things like that, and just doing what you want with it. So there's just something about being free.
Dividing the spoils.
Something like that, yeah.
Can we go to Dr. Yap? I remembered you mentioned something earlier, like separation does not necessarily lead to independence. Could you carry on with that line of thought?
Yes, I think Sarah mentioned, for instance, uncertainty regarding currency. Although the Yes camp has said that they would just adopt the pound and that there is no plan B, the problem is that they would adopt a currency in which they would have very little influence, and you would get the situation like with the euro, where the euro suits the German economy, and in fact the German government is the main driver for the euro policies regarding the euro. And the crisis in Portugal, Italy, and Spain and Ireland has resulted from the fact that the economic policies of the eurozone have not been suitable for them, but they've just something they've got to live with. Now, the proposal of the pound, I'm sorry to go into specifics, is that they could just use it, but then you're reduced to a position like Ecuador and Panama. My main concern is that the two economies, the Scottish economy and the wider UK economy, are extremely closely integrated, reflecting the long union. But other things are also integrated, and it's underestimating the difficulties.
We're talking here about 300 years of union. You're right. It probably is quite intricately united. So, Leila, how would you respond to that then?
Well, I think there have been these fears about the currency union as such, and all the Better Together campaign who are coming around saying now that the currency union, I mean, they're kind of threatening, saying they don't want to be be part of the currency union. Whereas if they are patriotic and if they are actually so keen on keeping Scotland with Britain, I don't see why the currency union cannot work. And also, more important,
but is that true?
But
is that true independence, though? Is that true independence?
I agree with you, but at the same time, you must remember that it's a globalized world. When America sneezes, we all happen to catch the cold. I mean, all these bankers, all these people who would come in and kind of ruin the economy. We don't have an oil fund, which we should have. And I think basically it's a question of, as Ndiki said, we really should take care of our own resources and make sure that 60% of the oil resources are in Scotland. 25% of renewable new resources are in Scotland. We've got a country that can be along the same with Norway. I was in Oslo just a few weeks ago, and I think it's a question of what it is you want. It's also a fair, equitable society we're looking for. There are more food banks. Now, all the Gordon Browns of the world, all the Labour Party of the world, I mean, Labour Party was born in Scotland, Keir Hardie, and what has happened is Scotland's always been kind of getting the governments we don't want, we've not voted for, 6 Tory governments we did not vote for, and that's why nationalism was born in a way that we have, in fact, continued to get to want our freedom. Yes.
Thank you very much. Now, could you move to the centre a bit? Thank you. Now, Sarah.
Physically, that is.
Yes, that's better. Thank you. Sarah, there is this comparison you mentioned, you talked about in the Quebec case. Now, what would you say to, did you agree with what Leila just said?
In what in specific, or? Just
well, it's the with the resources, and then you can really be
being part of a currency union. Yeah,
yes.
being part of a currency union is the way the world is going,
and prosperous country, independent.
Well, I think Scotland obviously has a rich amount of resources, and of course I believe that they should be more involved with how those resources are used and allocated and how they benefit from it, since it is part of Scotland. But, you know, like Quebec, it's also rich of resources, but that doesn't necessarily mean that complete control on its own is in its benefit. You know, we live in a free market, a lot of the Western world, and we need this kind of competition from other sources, and a lot of the industries have said that, you know, they're going to pull out of Scotland should it go independent, and I think that'll even hurt Scotland more.
I mean, you must keep your eye closely on Canadian media. How is the Scottish referendum playing out in your home country? Is it striking a chord, or is it how is it being digested, I suppose I should put it?
I think it's quite split, actually. Some people say that it does ring a bell, and you know, there's an echo of what happened in Quebec, but they also say that the situation is very different. You know, just the history, and Quebec's situation is similar, again, as I said, but also quite different. So some people say it's starting to ring bells of what happened in '95, and there has been a rise in the National Party recently.
Do you think this will perhaps spearhead a new independence movement in Quebec? Because it has been 20 years since that very, very narrow defeat of independence. So, you know, the Scottish referendum, particularly if Scotland goes independent, could potentially mean that the Quebec independence movement gets a new lease of life.
It could. I don't think it will, because of what's recently been happening in Quebec the last couple years. There was an election in Quebec just last year, I believe, where the National Party wasn't voted in. It was a very close call, but it wasn't. Again, the situation is different, and perhaps it will raise interest in the nationalists in Quebec, kind of associating with what's happening in Scotland. But I don't really know. I don't think it will. It might get people talking again, but in terms of the politics and moving towards a referendum in Quebec again, I don't see that happening anytime soon, personally. But you never know.
Right. Yes, we've. Thank you, Sarah. Now we've got some comments from people who are watching our Hangout discussion. Nick, you have them. Can you share?
Yeah, this is from Rick James. This is the audience watching this BBC World Service Google Hangout live now. Rick James has taken the trouble of sharing a comment, and he says, I'm just reading it now. We'd be awesome if they would bring in Mel Gibson in his William Wallace attire to announce Scotland's independence with these words, if they get to be independent, that is. And the word is, so this is it, no more UK. So there we go. So William Wallace being brought into this, of course, Mel Gibson made him famous in the Braveheart film, 20 years or so ago.
No.
So is this all about, following on from Rick James's comment, I put an open question to you. Is this all about history and identity, you think? Because, I mean, we've been talking quite a bit about the nuts and bolts of where Scotland's going in the future, and money and finance, and the ins and outs of daily governance of Scotland. But what about more ethereal things like history and identity? Is that perhaps informing why you're such a strong yes voter, Ndidi? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it has to do with identity for Scotland, managing their own resources. And I'm sorry, could you take that question again? Sorry.
This idea of history and identity, and harking back to the days of William Wallace, the great Scottish freedom fighter, as some would call him. Is it about going back to and harking back to that history and that identity of being truly Scottish and needing to own one's history and identity, do you think? Because you're someone who hasn't been living in Scotland very long.
Yeah.
You're from Nigeria, which is a bit of a different context, a bit of a different culture to Scotland. Can you see that playing out in the rest of Scotland, this grasping after history?
Yeah, I think it's about identity, just as you said. Being in Scotland, I've seen that the Scottish people are very, they like to identify with their culture. It's all about, being Scottish, the language, the music, and just.
What about those? What about those Scottish people that you've spoken to, who you've confided in and said that you're voting yes? Do they find that quite?
Well,
Do they find you as a Nigerian saying you're voting yes in a Scottish independence referendum? Do they find that quite strange?
Not really, but they refuse to tell me their votes. A lot of them are undecided for some reason, no, they don't find it strange though. They don't find it strange. They just say, "Oh, really?"
Okay, so Leila, are you laying claim to some kind of history or some kind of Scottish identity by voting yes?
Not at all. I think Scotland is now a very multicultural, diverse country, and I think this vote for independence, in fact, is to look into the future. It's what we want to build in the future of Scotland, rather than harking back to William Wallace or even 300 years before that. And it was a union of government, as you know, as the union of parliaments. And it's never actually been a union of parliaments in many ways. So basically, it's Scotland asserting it's wanting to take its future in its own hands and create a society that's going to be more equitable and just. And I think that's what the young or the future of Scotland, that's what we're looking for.
Well, Dr. Yep, can you answer the same question?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think the issue of the Scottish identity has been inextricably linked with the identity of the United Kingdom and the British Empire. And of course, Scots helped develop the British Empire and continue to play an important part. So I don't see why independence is so essential to further develop the Scottish identity. The second issue, I think, is that to some extent, what people consider to be the Scottish identity is partly a fictional creation of Sir Walter Scott in the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th. There was this idea that grew up of Scotland being a romantic place, tartan kilts, music and all that. But in fact, that's a little bit of a Disney approach.
Let's get a response to that point that you make, just quickly, from other guests. Who wants to respond to what's just been said there by Penny?
I can't believe the statement that it's a Disneyfied and it's a fantasy. Scots have a rich heritage. They, even at the Union of Parliaments, they've had their own law system, the legal system, the monetary system, the different church. And in fact, this was all enshrined in the Union of Parliaments, the issue of the Arbroath Statement. And in fact, I'm a wee bit worried that perhaps I'm not saying definitely Dr. Or Mr. Yak, I think many of the people who are refusing or going on the no tend to look at it at a very short term. They're just looking at it from to affect my pension, how is it going to affect my generation, but rather than looking at a visionary as
Sarah, Sarah, what would you have to say?
You're being short-termist, Sarah. You're not thinking beyond yourself, really.
No, I think the Scottish identity is changing. I mean, look at this whole panel. We all consider a close connection with Scotland, yet none of us have these deep-founded roots in Scotland. So I think it's important to obviously, respect and what's the right word? To nurture, the Scottish heritage and the culture, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to change our politics in order to do that. I think the Scottish identity is something beautiful, it's something special, and everyone can appreciate that, and it's important to appreciate that, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should change a whole country and put a lot of things at risk because of that.
You say you're undecided. Just a quick comment from you. Are you moving either way as a result of having heard what you've heard in the last 20 minutes? Have we done you a service here by any chance?
Yeah, as far I really like the way everyone talk about it, because in the past 1 year, as far as I've observed, I think both sides, the the campaigners from both sides very carefully and very sophisticatedly to deter the issue of identity. Just like Gary has said, everyone is just talking about oil, the currency union, and the EU membership, but no one really care about, or no one really focus on what's the meaning of being a Scot in the United Kingdom or Scot in independent Scotland. And so I think because the Yes campaign wants to broaden their basis, they are fear of being labeled as a nationalist. Oh, and of course the unions although they blame the separatists as a nationalist, so they will not try very hard to polish the brand of Britain or the meaning of staying in the UK. They are just to some extent, there's a scaremongering the uncertainty after the independence. So at the very stage of the referendum in the past 2 weeks, I think that some people, either from the Yes campaign or the Better Together, are already to draw their attention to the identity and the historical linkage issue. I think it's healthy. It's a factor that should not be marginalized in the process.
All right, thank you very much. Just a reminder, this is BBC, this is a Google Hangout on the BBC, a special discussion on Scottish independence, the referendum coming up in just 3 short days' time. The polls are evenly balanced at the moment. No one really knows which way the referendum will go, or no one's brave enough to predict. We are looking at how global citizens in Scotland look at the issue and how they share their views. This is a great platform for you to do just that. I'm with Sarah Wang, looking at this very issue.
Right. So we're moving on. What impact will this have on the rest of the world, do you think? That's a question for everybody. Anybody want to answer that question? Raise hand. Dr. Yap?
In terms of impact, there is an interesting issue going back to finance. The 2 main Scottish banks, which were very dominant in the United Kingdom banking system, nearly brought down the British economy, the Royal Bank of Scotland and the Bank of Scotland. Now, the banking sector is, in fact, rather overrepresented in the Scottish economy. But I think there are some concerns expressed as to how this would affect the international relationship. But I think the issue of how it will affect the world, I don't think the world will be affected that much, because the Scottish economies, well, it's 5 million people. I think culturally the world will be interested. So I think that it's being looked at carefully by the Catalonians and the Flemish people. They're looking carefully. But the interesting thing, and I'm sorry to harp back on the economy, is that Catalonia and Flanders are the richest parts, Spain and Belgium respectively. And I think we are overestimating the Scottish wealth. Okay.
I mean, that is an issue we touched on earlier.
Yes.
Let's talk more about you saying that other independence movements around the world may take heart from what's happening in Scotland, and it's a point that we alluded to when we were talking to Sarah about Quebec, this may pour fuel into the tanks of their own independence struggles. What about the rest of you? What do you think the impact will be of what's happening in Scotland this week, irrespective of what happens on Thursday, who wins, yes or no? What kind of impact do you think it will have? What Scotland's undergone, what the UK's gone through, what impact will that have on the rest of the world? Who wants to go next?
If I may come in, I think the impact is already on United Kingdom, the rest of the United Kingdom. Wales is asking for its own parliament. England is asking for its own parliament. And we know that the north of England, big cities want to have their own. And I think it's not just a question of just these islands. I think Mr. Miak has already referred to Catalan and parts of Belgium. And I think it's a basic thing for a human being to want to be independent, to be free. And we should all know, having been part of the British Empire, one of the things that drives people is to make their own destiny, whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. It is something that you learn, just like you tell a child that what you're doing is wrong, but you learn from your own mistakes. So I think there will be a tremendous repercussions around the world, yes.
So you're saying this is an example of a country choosing its own destiny, and that's the example it's sending out to the rest of the world?
Absolutely.
How would the rest of you respond to that?
What about Mr. Xu?
Yes, I think from the UK's perspective, I think if there is a yes vote, I think from the perspective of the government over the world, maybe they will think the UK was further blown, or the UK was further be weakened in the social status. So I think it will pose a very huge impact on the balance of the powers in the world politics, especially just some unions have argued, or some just like Henry Kissinger, or some American, even the Canadian cousin of UK has argued that if there is a yes vote, maybe it will be welcomed actually by the Russia or by the PRC. I think, yeah. I think it's one of the factor of the Scottish referendum. But if there is a no,
do you think Tibet or Hong Kong will take heed of what's happening in Scotland? They'll relate it to perhaps their own current situation, their own context, or is it something completely divorced?
Yes, I think for the case of Hong Kong, maybe Hong Kong is more comparable to the Scottish experience if we compare it to Tibet.
Layla earlier talked about this is about people choosing their own destinies, choosing freedom. You know, there are some in Tibet who may say that that's the case there. That's very much the case there.
Yes, and but I think Tibet, the referendum is a how to say, is a destination for maybe a long process of a long process of the past 30 years, from the devolution referendum in 1979 and the re-establishment of the Scottish Parliament in 1997, and now we finally reach this destination. And I think for the Tibetan issue, it still takes some more time for the people in Tibet and the rest of part of China to consider which way is the most appropriate and applicable way to reach the consensus. Yeah.
Sarah, what do you think?
I think worldwide this is going to raise discussion in a lot of places. I think change will be a big focus point, whether that's with independence or without. I think what's going to happen in the UK is that this has raised issue that change is needed. This might fuel some other countries to raise the question of referendums and independence and taking more control of their countries. I don't know if it'll actually lead to proper referendums, but I think this is definitely going to raise discussion whether or not countries need more control and some sort of devolution and more sovereignty. I think that's what will happen.
Now, thank you, Sarah. Now, time is running out. I think we should finish with a thought from each of our panelists. Whatever happens in 3 days, do you think Scotland has already changed? Who want to go first?
Let's start with Ndidi, because it'd be good to hear from you. Do you think Scotland has changed, whatever way things go on Thursday?
I don't think so. Not so much, but you would have your freedom or your independence to do whatever needs to be done in terms of governing your resources. I think that's the only thing that would change, and yeah, just your leadership and governing your affairs and your resources, basically.
Okay, but
not so much. I think the state will still, operations will go on business as usual. Just a few different changes.
Let's take the ultimate result of Thursday out of the equation just for a second and say, what kind of a country is Scotland today compared to what it was, say, at the start of the referendum campaign on both sides? Do you think that what the country's been through in the last little while has forged some kind of a new country, in a way, some kind of a new Scotland with new possibilities, or do you think that it's pretty much business as usual?
Can I speak? Oh, sorry.
Yes, please do. Yeah. Please do.
Well, I'll speak first. On the positive side, I think it has interested people. It has got many people, even school children, interested in their own country and interested in the political process. And the fact that people are talking about an 80% turnout, possibly is a very good thing. But on the negative side, I think it has resulted in some serious nationalistic passions, which have resulted in bullying. And as a person who's been trying to distribute leaflets about no and all that, I've personally, and I'm saying this because it's the BBC World Service, been the recipient of racist comments, and there are shouts like, you know, go back, you English, to where you belong, and things like that. So I think there will need to be quite a bit of healing. There are certainly families where discussions do not occur because they get so passionate, and so I think a healing process will be needed after the result.
Quite a bruising experience that needs to be healed. Leila Soma, what do you say to that? Is it a?
I think I agree with her, but it's been totally in uncalled for numbers. There has been some disputes and conflicts, and I think what we should think about is on Friday, whatever the result, hold hands together, all lang syne, as Robert Budden said, the end of something and the beginning of something new, whatever it may be. I think that's what we should aim for.
Sarah?
Yeah, just similar to what Dr. Yip said, I think it's great that people are now getting more interested in politics and raising issues and discussing issues and trying to sort these out. The problem is, you know, there's always a divide when it comes to these type of important big decisions. And I think there have been cases of extreme hostility and violence between the people. And essentially, that's what concerns me, that's going to come out of this, whether, regardless of what's going to happen on Friday after the referendum happens. In one way, this whole referendum has been unifying, but in another way, it's been quite separating of the people. And I just hope that whatever happens at the end, people can realize that we're all in this together, and just kind of come together in a non-violent, non-hostile way. So that's what I think, yeah.
Zhu, your views, and of course we are coming to the closing stages of this BBC Google Hangout, looking at Scottish independence and the referendum with guests currently based in Scotland. Zhu, what do you say? What kind of Scotland has emerged from this period?
I think the most significant meaning for the referendum and what makes the referendum different from the average general election is that every vote counts, and everyone's vote and will directly appeal or conveyed by the outcome of the referendum. The politics or the political outcome is not merely the arrangement between the Westminster elite or the party leaders across the body, because in the general election people just choose the PM in his or her own constituency, but in a referendum everyone can directly link it to the final outcome. And I think that the passion or the passion of the joining the public affairs was evoked throughout the whole process. No matter it is a yes vote or the no vote, I think it's a very meaningful process for all the people across Scotland.
So indeed, overall, do you think it's been a positive or negative experience that Scotland has gone through up to this point?
I think it's
definitely quite positive for me. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Let's get a view from Ndidi in the closing moments of the Google Hangout.
I think it's been a positive experience. As Leila said, I mean, people have definitely become self-aware, you know, about, you know, Scotland, and Scotland, the visibility has increased. So I think overall it's been positive. We've been able to see what Scotland can do, like a futuristic Scotland, you know. So it's been a positive for me, positive experience.
All right, on that note, we should end our discussion today. I think time is running out.
Indeed, Sarah, thank you very much. And we want to thank all our guests for their excellent contributions. We hope you and our BBC audience on YouTube and Google Plus can join us again for another Google Hangout discussion very soon. So all that's left for us to say is goodbye and thank you very much.
And goodbye from me.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for